Good afternoon. Welcome to the November 26th Board of Commissioners Special Call Meeting and Work Session. And we have 4 presentations this afternoon. So we'll start with the first one. County Manager, I believe you have the first on the child well-being in Cobb County.
Yes, thank you, County Manager. I'm delighted to help present this first item. I met with United Way about a month or two ago and got some pretty interesting data about the state of our community with respect to child well-being. And I thought, well, this is not only pertinent to District 4, but to the entire county, and asked if they'd be willing to come to a work session and present that data, and lo and behold, here we are today.
Great, super.
So from my understanding, we have Milton Little here with us, who is the President and CEO of United Way, and I have a bio here. I'm sure you heard this 1,000 times, but I think we'll go ahead and just educate ourselves on your background. Milton Little Jr. became the first African-American president of United Way of Greater Atlanta, the second largest in the national system in July 2007. Although altogether, Little has helped raise more than $500 million for local community needs and priorities. Before joining United Way, he served as Chief Operating Officer and Interim President and CEO of the National Urban League. He graduated magna cum laude from Morehouse College with a BA in sociology and earned an MA in urban sociology and social policy from Columbia University. He's a board member and serves on many advisory committees, including the Center for Assessment and Policy Development, Chair of the Southern Education Foundation, and Vice Chair of the Board of Directors for Ways to Work. I would read the rest, but there's a list that travels long, but needless to say that he is very active in leadership and serving Metro Atlanta, and was even selected most recently to serve on the mayor's transition team in Atlanta. We welcome you here to Cobb County. Understand you're a native New Yorker. I was born there, and you have some fellow New Yorkers who are here in the room today. And we also have 2 sons, Milton and Taylor, and 3 grandchildren. And we're just grateful that you're here today to talk a little bit about how our children are doing here in Cobb County.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. I know we're still outnumbered, we New Yorkers here in this room. And I should, actually, I'm going to have to change the bio, because by revenue now, we've become the #1 United Way in the country out of 1,200 across
Very
the U.S.
good.
Is there any way you could,
That's a testament to the generosity that we've seen across the 13 counties that we cover. What I want to start off by saying is there are a number of incredibly wonderful things happening in Cobb County, and all of you should be very proud of. You don't have to go far to see much of those good things that are happening. One thing that's required for the county to fully achieve its promise is to support children and families, to ensure that every child has the opportunity to learn and develop. That's the way to realize Cobb's potential. And it should be the top priority of all of us who call ourselves leaders. When we ensure that every child has equal access to the supports and services that they need to learn and develop, they become the county's biggest assets. And meeting the obligation to children can be accomplished simply by doing a couple of things all around strengthening the systems of support, education, child health care, and support to parents and caregivers that they need. Because we know if we don't provide those supports, the problems that those children have at a very young age only grow worse. And what I'd like to do is just point to a couple of items here. Number one, we define child well-being in this way as the presence of opportunity, resources, and supports that children need to reach their full potential. We are the only community that has created a child well-being index. And that's a way of measuring how children are faring across 16 different indicators. There are 3 buckets that those indicators fall into: a set of child outcomes that are child well-being, 3rd grade reading level, 8th grade math, things like that. Second is family, percentages of families that are financially unstable, what percentage of families have a housing cost burden where they're paying more than 30% of their income to house themselves. And then a set of community indicators that include post-secondary education, the percentage of adults with high school diplomas, and the percentage of moms who don't have those degrees. Child well-being is an issue that affects the entire region. We have, through our index, created a score that goes from 0 to 100. You'll see there next to the map, the score for the region is 58.9. And that is, again, the composite of those 16 indicators. When you look at those data, you'll see that roughly 500,000 children across metropolitan Atlanta are living in communities of low or very low child well-being that are captured in the red and the sort of lighter brownish yellow there. You'll see that those child well-being challenging areas are spread all across greater Atlanta. They are not resident in any one particular community. You can also see what the child well-being score is for Cobb County. Looking a little closer, there are 53,000 children, roughly 27% of the children in Cobb County that live in communities with very low or low child well-being, which means they don't have consistent access to the quality services and supports they need in order to achieve at their full potential. You'll see the child well-being, the child score is 61. You'll see family score and community scores are a little higher. So what accounts for some of the child well-being score there of 61? Those are issues related to infant mortality, low birth weight, the failure of kids to get to kindergarten reading on with the skills they need to be successful, getting to third grade reading on grade level, getting to eighth grade performing at math, and ultimately high school graduation rates. And so that's what's behind that lower than what we'd want to see score. Here's a little picture of Cobb demographics. I probably don't need to go too far here. You, more than anyone else, know what the picture of the community looks like. The disparities exist by race. They exist by race across the entire region. So there's nothing unique that's happening here in Cobb County relative to these challenges. The bottom line for this is that opportunity is not spread equally across geographies, nor is it available equally across race and ethnicity. And there are large issues at play. We have focused on a handful of communities where the challenge is most significant. As you saw, the overall score for the region for Cobb County was about 68, but you'll see in these zip codes some particular challenges. And what they have to do is with access to supports and services, people having difficulty accessing supports because they don't have transportation or because the hours that those services are available are incompatible when they work. I mean, if you're going to an agency that has only daytime service hours and you happen to work 2 or 3 jobs, several of them at daytime, you're not going to be able to get the kinds of supports and services that you need. And again, these low scores have a lot to do with low birth weight, with child poverty rates, with family income, and third grade reading. Again, we have another picture of race and ethnicity in these Cobb County, in the areas that where the low child well-being is most pronounced. And as you can see, they look different from the other counties where we're focused on. On average, more blacks, more Hispanics, less whites than other parts of the county or in the region. So what we've decided to do in response is to mobilize the entire region and the entire community to address these issues. We've used the Child Wellbeing Index to set some goals for where we want to be over the next 10 years. We're trying to aggregate effort by ensuring that all of our investments are designed to focus on those child well-being outcomes. We have asked each one of the funded partners of ours to show how they contribute to those overall goals. We've set some bold goals. We're continuing to sort of mobilize the public, private, nonprofit, and other sectors all together around this issue. Again, let me close by simply saying we know that there are tremendously wonderful things happening in Cobb County. We want to make sure that equality of opportunity and access to opportunity and the supports and services is spread as evenly across the region. There are some communities that are just behind the 8 ball. They've always been behind the eight ball, and we need a very specific place-based strategy focused on those zip codes to ensure that the folks who live there in the most challenging circumstances can have the same opportunities that all of us have. Promise of a good school, promise of a good job, access to those, access to transportation when it's necessary, early and consistent and high-quality health care. All of those are essential. And we like working with the community and continue to support the community and all of your efforts to make sure these children have the best future possible. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think some of us have some questions, if that's
Sure.
okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. I was noticing on your last slide here, you said that 70 agencies help more than 35,000 people across Cobb County, and that a little over 9,000 live in communities with very low CWB, which is
Yes, sir.
child welfare.
Child well-being.
Yeah, thank you. All right. I guess the question I would have is, and I'm sure there's a good reason, why wouldn't more of your resources be directed to that 25%?
That is a great question. The child well-being effort is probably 4 years in the making.
Okay.
And we took a look at where our historic investments had gone. And to our surprise, roughly 25% across the region had been going to the areas most in need.
Okay.
And so part of the strategic shift is how do we increase the investments in those communities that are most pronounced. And so that is the starting point, but over the coming years, you'll see those numbers increase pretty significantly.
And I imagine that since I see some really famous groups here like the CFR and Must Ministries, they're the Center for Children, Youth, Young Adults. I know a lot of these myself, and I'm sure the board members do too. Before you make your allocations, you probably work with them to see where they're spending their resources to make sure you're not being duplicative in your effort.
Yes. So there are 3 buckets where we're trying to invest. We're trying to invest in preventive services to make sure we can stop problems from starting. We're trying to address those problems that people have, and so the issues related to homelessness or income supports, those kinds of things. And then there's a third body that's around place, where the zip codes, where the issues are most pronounced. And in conversations with those organizations and others, we're able to sort of marry what they're doing with what we can invest in, with what philanthropy is doing and what others, so that we've got a continuum of supports and not what we've had in the past, which is everybody sort of in their own lane, doing their own thing. But the aggregate effort not yielding big measurable changes in the big needles that measure the well-being of the region.
I would like to pick your brain a little bit more later. Michael Murphy is our special assistant for special projects. I'd like to have him get a hold of you, so you and who else wants to sit down. Because I want to see how we can better direct our efforts to be in line with what you're doing to make sure that we complement each other in this effort.
Well, thank you for that invitation. I think that was hopefully the outcome that I saw when the invitation came to come.
Because I see some of the elements of how you derive your analysis. I'd be interested to see what they are, so that maybe there's something we can be doing better to help you, support you in that effort.
Thank you very much.
So I'll have Michael reach out to. And do you have his information, or do you have a card, or?
I do.
Okay.
I've got it, all you need.
All right. So it'll be in the near future, I can assure you.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Any other questions from the board members?
One thing I didn't do is introduce some people who are here in the room. And sitting in our audience is Melanie Kagan, who's our regional director here in Cobb County, who has been a great point of contact. And to her left is Kevin Eccles, who's also with United Way. But we have some other board members who are here in the audience as well, who some of you may also know. Bill and Lon I see sitting back here, and I think we also had someone else from United Way that I ran into earlier this afternoon. If there's anyone else here, please raise your hand, because I don't want to miss you. but we have a strong web of support here from United Way. I know with the place-based investment, they've invested in some unique programming in the Six Flags area, but there were more zip codes than just the Six Flags area that was reflected
Sure,
in their
right.
program too, and I think is deserving of some attention as well.
And, sort of give you an idea, we work very closely with the federal government on the CBDG program. The Representative Scott has really done a fantastic job of carving out $21 million for this county, which, given the fact that it's a large country, that's a significant amount of resources. That's what I'm talking about. Maybe there's something that we're doing as we work on these approval processes that we can be working together. Sometimes I see what you just talked about. There's people working in silos.
Yes.
And there's no synergy there. So I'll have Michael be reaching out to you here certainly next week, and we'll set something up here, and I'll be fascinated to sit down with you and your team and see what we can do here.
Thank you very much. Look forward to it.
Thank you. Thanks for
Appreciate
coming
that,
today.
Chairman.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me.
You bet.
You can clap.
Next on the agenda is Director Heaton with the Super Bowl Task Force.
Yeah.
I understand they're playing the Super Bowl at SunTrust Stadium now. We've made that change.
Don't start that rumor.
Oh, I've been misinformed?
That's how rumors get started. Good afternoon, Chairman, Board of Commissioners, and County Manager. I am here to present a Super Bowl Task Force update, particularly the impacts that Super Bowl may have on Cobb County. I will be focusing on 3 areas, and I will not be giving the entire presentation. There's experts that do this. But we'll be focusing on economic development, public safety, and then the impact at the Cobb County International Airport. So first up, what I'm going to do is invite Dana Johnson to come up and talk a little bit about the economic development impacts.
Thank you, Director. Good afternoon, Chairman. Dana Johnson, Cobb County Community Development, here to present some information to you about economic development and how we are preparing for the big game coming up in a few months. First thing I want to focus on is how are we going to utilize this opportunity to have all of these people coming into and leaving from Cobb County, from our airport, as an economic development opportunity. And the Development Authority of Cobb County has provided a grant of approximately $40,000 to Select Cobb to help create basically a sky club within our airport that will allow us, as people are leaving, we'll be able to kind of go in and have a reception and leave with a gift basket that is being provided by Select Cobb to help encourage them to bring their businesses here when they leave Cobb County. Let them know that how we would welcome them to have conversations with them about relocating their businesses or expanding their businesses into our community. So this is an excellent opportunity to do it. The reason why we chose it when we're leaving versus when they're arriving, they're going to receive so much stuff the entire time they're here in the Atlanta region that it would be better to give it to them at the end when they're walking out the door. So it'll be the last thing they have is this great gift basket from Select Cobb and from the Chamber. There are a number of meetings that are occurring in order to kind of coalesce around preparations for this particular game. And Cobb Travel and Tourism, since this is a huge tourism opportunity for the region, Holly and her team over at Cobb Travel and Tourism are doing absolutely fantastic work of connecting with the Atlanta Tourism Agency to make sure that all of us are kind of coordinating and connecting our efforts together. Also coordinating with our public safety teams, both here in Cobb County, Sheriff's Office, as well as with the city, to make sure that everyone partner knows what's happening event-wise so that we can prepare and have a strategy for everything that's occurring during those 10 days of festivities.
Is that the Atlanta banner? Or is that a Super Bowl banner?
Actually, if you look at that, that's the roof of the stadium.
Okay, but the logo and everything, all right, and the wording, is that an NFL sponsored?
I don't think it is. I think it's an Atlanta one.
Oh, it's a host committee banner,
That's correct, Chairman.
because you know what I'm focusing on. Yeah, all right, okay. No,
Excellent. Another really innovative way that we're trying to take advantage of all of these visitors coming through our airport is we've worked diligently with Carl and his team in Hawthorne in order to create a kiosk. So as people are kind of coming through, there'll be an interactive video screen where people will be able to find out weather, hotel information, restaurants nearby, other tourist attractions, information on economic development, and information on Hawthorne and the company that is sponsoring this. So all of this is going to be a really great interactive ability to really communicate in a kind of up-to-date digital manner and give people opportunities to learn all about the great events happening here in Cobb County. And lastly, we're going to have a welcome banner coming down the actual airport tower, which is going to be a welcome to Cobb banner. We are in the design process, which is why it's a blank banner here on the screen. But it's something that we're going to make sure people know when they're arriving that they are here in Cobb County and that we're open for business. So with that, I want to thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on economic development and preparations for the big game.
If we go back to the Hawthorne kiosk, and down here in the bottom it says, meet your FBO. Is it possible to get a helicopter in there instead of a fixed-wing airplane?
I am sure they can design all kinds of things, sir.
No, it's not.
I guess the answer is no.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
They don't come in helicopters here.
Thank you, Dana. Next up would be public safety, and we'll start that with our, oops, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll mess it up. We'll start with the EMA coordination, and as most of you know, the Emergency Management Agency is kind of the coordinating group of the whole thing. And first, we talk about the inclement weather plan. It seems to happen each year that we have a big event in the Atlanta area. And I know that already EMA is working with DOT to put together plans of how we could clear roadways to get people in and out of the city as easily as we can. It does involve state DOT as well, because many of the thoroughfares are state, but we are already working on plans of what we could do if we do get inclement weather. I'll let Mr. Van Hagel talk about what's going to be happening at the airport. He's got some slides there. Our WellBOC will basically fuse us, the region together, so we'll be able to see what's happening in Atlanta. They can be seeing what's happening here, and it's basically the sharing of information between all of our agencies. So if they have needs, we can see what those needs are, and vice versa. And that WellBOC we've had for quite a while. It's only used in big events, and this is a prime example when it would be used. We also talking about using the WellBOC as a fusion center, if you will, for local here as well, so that we can see what the needs are from each one of our public safety agencies or agencies within the county that we may be sharing resources with. Along with that, I didn't have it on there, but 911, instead of having a whole slide, our biggest issue with 911 is making sure that we have a good communications plan between all of these agencies, who's using what frequencies, and that's something that'll be ongoing as we build this plan and finalize it. The next is the fire department. The fire department will be standard operating procedures for most of the event, except at or near the airport. We will be bringing the extra hours up for the air crash truck there at the airport, with the number of airplanes that will be coming in and out, as well as stationed there. Fire has been working closely with DOT and the airport to make sure we have a facility that can house the unit there while this is ongoing. They will adjust, and it will take a little bit of overtime on the fire side to staff that 24/7 for those 2 days that you see on the slide.
Quiet hours at that airport? There are not, really.
No, the tower's not manned 24 hours, right? You have the pilot control lighting?
That's correct. That's correct. The airport's operationally, it's open 24 hours. Anybody can land any time of the day. The control tower is only open from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Yeah.
That's when the amount of traffic requires the use of a control tower. Otherwise, it goes to standard operating rules.
Well, my concern though is that we know we're gonna have lots of planes parked there. So if somebody lands after 11 o'clock, they're just gonna park their airplane where they can find a hole?
We're working with the air traffic control tower and the FAA to get the control tower hours extended 24 hours during this event.
I think that might be the best way to go, just to be safe.
Yeah.
All right.
Next up for mine is the sheriff's office, and Chief Beck is out of town, but they are working to support the uniform officers in various locations, and also working with detention and the judicial staff and coordination. So if we do have some issues that hopefully it can be processed through the courts quickly, as well as they are assisting Atlanta some at the Super Bowl itself. The final numbers have not been determined yet.
Who's picking up the tab for that?
I do not know. I'd have to ask Chief Beck on that one.
Let's find out.
Yeah.
Chairman, I believe that Chief Beck had mentioned there'd be a possible reimbursement by the organizing committee, and we'll verify that through Chief Beck's
I'm
office.
not a big fan of that adjective, possible. You know? I mean, they don't come up here and help us with a baseball game, so we'll see the reciprocity there.
Sure.
Well, maybe next year during the World Series, they will.
I'm not gonna hold my breath.
I'm talking about the World Series.
I know what you're talking about. I'm sure we'll have it. I'm just saying that.
And next up, as we get more into detail with the police, I'm going to ask Lieutenant J.D. Lorenz to come up and talk a little bit about these slides.
And before you sit down, we are going to have a prohibition on cattle transport vehicles.
Either that or a steak sale. No.
Thank you, Director.
Hey, JD, before you get started, I want to commend you and your team for what you did again in this baseball season. I mean, truly, it's remarkable. You really have a great team down there, and it reflects the leadership that you've done on this. So my hat's off to you.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. It's a team approach. We have a really great team, as you said. The police department is going to continue our looking at the Super Bowl and how we're going to approach it. We're actually taking a three-prong approach. We're going to have in-county events that we have to make sure we staff, out-of-county events that we'll have assets down at the Georgia World Congress Center and at the Super Bowl, and then our overall crime planning that we'll have. So some of the in-county events, McCollum Airport, we'll speak about in just a little bit. We know that's going to ramp up, and a lot of planes will be coming in there. SunTrust Park in Battery, Atlanta, we know we're going to have a few events with the celebrity football game that is going through planning stages now. Cobb Galleria Center is going to have a few events there we know that we'll help them plan for. And then other private events as they come up, we want to make sure we're staffing those or we're giving them good event plans for that as well. So very quickly, out of the out-of-county events, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, obviously where the game is, we'll have county assets that'll be there on game day. And before that, securing it, helping Atlanta PD. Georgia World Congress Center is going to have events there. And of course, the Fox Theater will have events. The 12-person tactical element each day we'll be sending down starting on the Friday before the Super Bowl. I'm sorry, like 10 days before the Super Bowl. 2 EOD techs and 1 K9 team to make up a strike team to help with that. At the airport, we plan to have 24-hour coverage starting Friday morning to Monday evening for security. We'll also have officers that are there working traffic. We know that when all the planes land, we're also going to have a bunch of limousines and ride shares that'll come to that area. So we want to make sure that our traffic plan outside of the airport is consistent with being successful. The property protection and to support customs inspections officers that are there will be some of the functions of our officers there. Obviously, we want to have no response onto the runway or taxiway without the traffic control clearance. We'll have radio communication with them to make sure that we don't violate any FAA rules there. The overall crime plan, we have officers that'll be outside of the county, some inside the county on specific events, but we want to make sure our overall crime plan is underway as well. So we're exploring some of our precinct staffing options. with beefing up some of our staffing there through some different options. And of course, we have special operations that's going to adjust their schedule as well. Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Mr. Von Hagel?
Chairman, Commissioner, thank you. We know that the airport's going to be significantly impacted by the Super Bowl, the big event day. And we know the Super Bowl no longer is a game, it's an event. And we're going to have a significant amount of our industry's transportation mode, the private corporate jet. It's going to be transporting people and equipment to our airport. How do we know this? By a few different things. One is we look at past experiences at other airports. That's Minneapolis. That's a
I don't see
movement
any
area.
helicopters in that picture, do you?
No, there's no helicopter.
The person taking the picture is in a helicopter.
No,
No, I believe it's a drone.
potentially. We have everything in planning for that, and I've already put my order in for 65-degree weather day, though,
Yeah,
so
good
the
plan.
snow won't be in our picture. That's the another year, Super Bowl in New Orleans. You can see the number of aircraft that are.
That helicopter gets around taking pictures. You know how long it takes to fly from Minneapolis to New Orleans on a helicopter?
This is our planning effort. The FAA asked us to look for the parking places in all airports within 90 miles of Atlanta. So we submitted our parking plan to maximize the use of the airport. We identified 200 parking spaces. You can see from there, those are all visiting aircraft on top of what we have. We're going to put them in every corner we can find.
That's a
I
lot
would-
of gas.
Sell gas. There'll be plenty of gas sold, I can assure you. What we also know is the FAA's projections. The FAA, through their experiences over the last many Super Bowls, has forecasted 1,100 aircraft will be looking for parking spaces in Metro Atlanta. I mentioned we found 200 on our airport. We have the most of any airport available. There's only 900 total parking spaces identified in all of Metro Atlanta. So 1,100 aircraft coming, 900 parking spaces available. So what that tells us, we know that not only will aircraft be coming and landing and parking, they'll be coming, dropping off, taking back off, and have to arrive back to pick up their passengers. Not everybody will have a space. That being the case, the FAA is looking at a reservation for a slot, an arrival and departure. So we're going to have to meter how many airplanes can come into the airspace around Atlanta. So they're limited to 103 aircraft in the sky at any single time. We're looking at peak arrivals Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the game, and then Monday, starting at halftime about at the end of the game to through Monday will be a very mass exodus from the airport. We also know we're going to be busy, not only from past experience we've seen and what the FAA's forecasts are, is we actually have 3 contracts out at the airport through our fixed-based operator. They have managed to get agreements with the 3 largest charter companies in the nation, NetJets, FlexJet, and Wheels Up, all to commit their operations to occurring at McCollum Airport. This is the first time in Super Bowl history that the 3 largest charter operators will be operating out of one airport. This is how we intend to manage the airport. We've set each up in their own situation. We'll be running essentially 4 different operations on the airport simultaneously. All 3 of those operators, they knew that we were going to have 3, and they were all comfortable with it because of the amount of planning we had done and the amount of a coordination with them that they felt comfortable to come in and do this.
Does that mean they're going to bring their own tugs and everything too?
No. I'll get to that in 1 second.
Okay.
This is the rate structure. It's an interesting slide here. I was telling you that there's a limited number of slots that you're going to have to make a reservation. You could see Cobb County, McCollum Field. We have 22 slots for Monday, the departure. We have 22 slots, the most out of any Atlanta airport out of the 103. 22 slots translates to we're going to have flights less than every 3 minutes. There's going to be somebody arriving and departing at the airport. We already know that's not enough slots. Is that IFR? Correct. There will be no VFR activity, or the VFR activity will not have any fun. They will be set aside until there's a slot with a flight every 3 minutes. You're going to have a long wait.
But the, under VFR conditions, they're not going to be closer than, I mean, because I know at Hartsfield, when we don't have weather, we're a whole lot closer than we
More
are.
efficient, yes.
Right.
So the one flight every less than 3 minutes, that's based on IFR conditions. If we do have VFR conditions, we can get them out faster and get them in quicker. So we can exceed the 22 if we have good weather, is what that means.
All right, for those who do not know what this IFR and VFR acronyms
Yes, sorry.
are,
Means if it's clear or cloudy.
IFR means bad weather,
Okay,
VFR means clear
Good
weather.
weather.
thank you.
So bad
Chairman.
weather, we're going to go slower. That's the 22 operations an hour. If it's good weather, we'll be able to fit more in
Much
because the
appreciated.
airplanes can be
IFR.
closer.
When the weather's,
I appreciate those up here thinking that we already knew this. It elevates my level of intelligence.
when the weather's bad, Atlanta will slow you down up over Washington.
Possibly.
So to the chairman's question about equipment on the airport, the answer is the charter companies will bring in much of their service equipment, but not the service to the aircraft equipment. So the FBO, Hawthorne, will have to go out and they're either renting or purchasing $1.5 million of equipment to service these 4 individual operations. So a multitude of additional fuel trucks and tugs, and we've got 50 to 60 additional employees coming in. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the first time 3 operators in one single airport. On the airport side, part of our airside planning you alluded to was the air traffic control tower. We've put in a request for the FAA to keep it open 24 hours. We fully expect the FAA should pay for that, but we do have a backup plan for a contract to come to me in case the FAA doesn't do it or is not responsive, that we find some way to have that control tower open 24 hours a day, even if we have to figure out a way to fund it.
Yeah, I think that with this many aircraft parked here, if something comes up, it's just better to have it open all the time and have the tower open too.
I agree, sir.
Even if nothing happens, if it's open, it's open, but if it's closed, then
Right.
I'll add that 22 operations an hour is based upon the control tower being open.
sure.
Now, Carl, all these planes coming in, obviously, the county would get revenue from fuel sales. Is there going to be a parking fee on the airport?
There is a parking fee on the airport. It'll be collected by Hawthorne. So it's part of those agreements that he's worked out, which will pay for the expenses of the 50 to 60 additional employees and all that additional equipment and the traffic control on the roadside.
Now, could that money also be used for extending the control tower hours?
It's in discussion. We're hoping first blush is the FAA should pay for that. They paid for it in Minneapolis. They should pay for it here.
Okay.
But we are opening that discussion. Just to give you some highlights, we are even looking at vehicle traffic planning. So we've got ways for cars and limos to come in and off the airport. It's going to be very busy on that side. We've got aircraft removal planning. As I mentioned, a plane landing every less than 3 minutes or taking off. It just takes one incident. We got to get that airplane off or we're going to have a traffic jam in the sky. So we've got plans to make that as efficient and as quickly as possible if needed. We've got plans to plan. So we have a whole bunch of planning efforts that we're working on.
Now, Carl, are all these instructions for the pilots and everything, I'm assuming that they're going to go out in the notice to airmen, Lisa? It's the things that pilots look at before they come into an airport. We're going to have all this out there long
Yes, sir.
before that, right?
The FAA's put together a Super Bowl notice to airmen that will be published, and I think it's already been published or it's about to be published.
But we'll
And
have
we
the
have-
specifics for ours.
We have specific directions on our airport on what to expect and all the information that they need.
Okay.
And we've got inclement weather planning. So this inclement weather actually will carry us through even beyond the Super Bowl. We've acquired a spreader there to spread a urea product. We can't use salt on the airport, but like a salt on the airport if we need to. We've also got a small plow so we can handle some conditions ourselves. The FBO, we were mentioning the $1.5 million, has purchased 2 de-icing trucks. So we'll be able to de-ice aircraft in case it's needed. If we get something beyond our means, we've coordinated with DOT so that we can hopefully use some of their equipment if we need to get the aircraft in and out. That's the highlights of what's going on at the airport and how we expect the Super Bowl to affect us.
Fuel. Obviously, Monday, there's gonna be a huge demand for fuel. What kind of capacity do we have for
Yeah,
fuel storage?
we've already talked about the arrangements with the fuel supplier. So we've got the delivery schedules all set up that we won't have any fuel shortage.
Okay.
We have over 40,000 gallons of fuel capacity of jet ready on the airport. We have an extra tank that we could open if we needed. The FBO assures me we don't need to open a third tank.
And what about the de-icing fluid? I mean, because you're gonna have to, are you using type 1 or type 4?
He's going with 4, I believe, and the de-icing fluid won't be ordered until we get closer and we see what kind of weather we're having. It's the same with all the urea and the products that we need. Depending on the maybe 2-week out forecast, we'll start to order all of those materials if inclement weather becomes a threat.
Oh, so now we have weather forecasters that are 100% right all the time now? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, but hopefully if they're predicting 70 degrees,
So, just-
we could be monitoring as it gets closer and
yeah, I
sleep
just like
better
to
at
meet
night.
them if they're out there. No pressure, Cassie.
Well, and is that something that DOT could use when we have inclement weather, or is it different stuff?
Now, the product we use wouldn't be very effective for DOT. So we're looking into some of the things. I don't remember if you were at one of the meetings we talked about, but talking to parks if we don't end up using, it's more like a fertilizer product. So we're looking at other sources. If we do buy it and we don't need it, who else can use it
Right,
and make
that's
good use
nice.
of the product?
Okay. And are we going to go over this in more detail at the next advisory board meeting?
Yes, we'll have a little bit more than this, but yes, we'll be going over it. We've been going over this with the Airport Advisory Board every meeting for, the last 8 months as we've been moving forward.
Looks good.
Great job, all of you.
Thanks, sir.
Hey, one thing, Carl, you might consider, because I know when I was on the advisory board, marketing the airport has always been one of our big things. You might get with Ross about, being able to show those pictures from Minneapolis and some of the other airports from the Super Bowl, and just showing the operations might be a great opportunity to kind of create a video that would sell the airport.
Yeah, I might add, we are looking at purchasing a camera to do time-lapse video. So you can see the kind of activity going. It might be great for our airport video to show the kind of activity. And we've been using this as a marketing opportunity at the conferences that we go to talk about the airport and where we're at and all that sort of thing. It's been very well received, having that commonality with people walking by our booth saying, the Super Bowl, it's coming to your airport? Oh, that's great. And it's a conversation starter. So thank you.
Ms. Carl?
International.
That's right. Okay, the next presentation, Dana Johnson, I believe, is on our efforts to support the 2020 census.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to introduce Mr. Jason Gaines, who is going to give you a presentation on the census and its upcoming for the nation and its impact on Cobb. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dana, and good afternoon. As we close in on the end of 2018, is getting close to the time to begin gearing up for the next decennial census in 2020. So I'm here to give you a brief overview of the census and its background and talk a little bit about the Complete Count Committee, which is going to be an integral tool in helping maximize response rates once the census surveys go out. And before I get too far into the presentation, I want to introduce Mr. Doug Stevenson, who's here today. He is with the Atlanta Regional Office of the U.S. Census Bureau, and he will be available to answer any questions that you may have following the presentation. So here's a quick overview of what I'll be covering today. I won't read that for the sake of brevity. Talk a little bit about the census itself. Residents in every state, Puerto Rico, and every U.S. territory are required to be counted every 10 years. This is mandated by the United States Constitution. It has been happening every 10 years since the year 1790. Census has a tremendous impact on daily life for many Americans, determines the number of seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, helps assist in drawing legislative districts at all levels of government, factors into the distribution of federal funds, and helps determine transportation needs as well for state and local communities. Census responses are confidential, and that's a very important aspect of the census. There's a stigma amongst some communities about how census information is used to look into the personal lives of people. But, the Census Bureau wants to reassure everyone that the information they collect is confidential. It's not shared with law enforcement agencies. It's not used to determine eligibility for government benefits. And all census employees swear to an oath of confidentiality, which if violated is a felony punishable by imprisonment and or being fined. New for the 2020 decennial census is the ability to respond via phone, mail, or online, and there's going to be a big push for online responses. That's going to be the big thing this time around to eliminate the amount of paper that has to be filtered or sorted through. Use of previously provided data and more accurate address listing and automated field operations will help assist in improving that response rate and limiting that amount of paper that goes out. So now let's talk a little bit about the Complete Count Committee itself. Well, what is it? It's a volunteer group that's established to increase awareness about the importance of responding to the census. It can be established by a local government or state government or even a tribal government entity on an Indian reservation. It's done in conjunction with community partners, which is a big piece of it. Again, it plays a vital role in spreading the word and emphasizing the importance of the census. The goals, generally speaking, again, to increase that self-response rate, utilizing the local knowledge of people on the Complete Count Committee to achieve those desired results, which is an increased self-response rate, and bringing together a cross-section of people throughout the community focusing on census awareness. There's a list of some sample strategies that a Complete Count Committee could utilize in order to carry out its mission. Again, I won't read those for the sake of brevity. Okay, so again, who's involved? With the establishment of a local government census Complete Count Committee, it would start here with the Board of Commissioners and the governing body appointing what's on that flow chart is listed as a committee chairperson. In the past, I believe that term has been the county liaison. So that liaison would be the point person for the county. And then the committee would be assembled and one of the members of the committee would be appointed the chair. But everything would flow through the county liaison appointed by the Board of Commissioners. So that's just kind of a breakdown of how that's structured, as well as subcommittees that could and should be formed within the Complete Count Committee. Most of your talent serving on the committee will represent those various sectors and could fill into those roles. So and I believe that's how it was structured back in 2010. So that's the way that it would be, done. Again, best practice, so to speak. the actual committee members, the committee members themselves would be, selected by a team led by the county liaison, but then verified by you all. In fact, I think we might be able, and Dana might be able to correct me on this, but I think we might be able to go directly to you with that list.
We would certainly look for guidance and direction from the Board of Commissioners. Would also be reaching out to different community groups that we know can hit special interests. For instance, a big challenge with the census is trying to count our homeless populations, because they have to get counted as well. So getting different social organizations together to help us. A lot of times we'll be looking to you for guidance and assistance on making sure we have the right people as part of the program. Usually pretty large, sir. There's no exact number, but it needs to be as large as it needs to be for us to make sure we're hitting each one. That's why the subcommittees are so important too, because the subcommittees really help you focus on different targets.
How big was it in 2010?
Chairman Boyce, in 2010, I believe there were, as far as the main committee members,
Right.
there were about 25 folks, if I recall correctly.
That's
sir.
correct, 25 to 30.
And they're all volunteers?
They all volunteer, but they are asked to volunteer by the commissioners, so normally they take it pretty seriously.
I'm sure they do, yeah.
I wasn't involved in that effort, but I did speak to a commissioner of another county where all their commissioners appointed 2 people from each of their districts to serve on it, to make sure there was cross-representation.
Okay. I'm sure that will be part of the selection process. I have no doubt about that.
All right, so on the screen before you now is just a list of next steps. Again, these are based on best practices that have worked previously, and we have a lot of reference material from 2010 to look back to in order to carry out this task for the 2020 census. And with that, are there any questions?
So when do you expect us to start forming the committee?
That's something that really, okay, so let me kind of preface this. On your agenda for tomorrow evening, there is an item that asks you all to commission the complete count committee and to appoint a county liaison to the complete count committee. Pretty much once that item is approved, if approved,
We're supposed to approve a committee tomorrow night?
no, the point to
liaison, I get that
appoint,
part.
to ask us to appoint the committee and to appoint a staff member as the county liaison. That's what you'd be asked to do. From that point, we would begin laying the groundwork for identifying potential committee members, and then we will work through the process, informing you all throughout the whole thing as far as getting folks on the committee and getting the committee officially established.
So you're the liaison.
Yeah, I was going to say, why wouldn't you be the liaison
Yes,
since you're the one briefing
I'm
us?
the person that's listed on the agenda item as the county liaison, yes.
Well, my real question is, okay, so we appoint, let's say that there's no objection to you tomorrow night, all right? When can we expect to see what the process is for nominating the committee members?
It'll be in the first quarter of 2019.
Is that like March 30th?
No, sir. It'll be before then, but
So be thinking of your appointment.
Well, I think the sooner you can get it to the board, because I think that it's gonna take a whole year to
absolutely,
do all this stuff. So the sooner we can start putting the committee together, the better it helps you out.
absolutely, yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
What's the time frame that the census is taken?
Yeah, I believe, yeah. Doug, you want to come up?
It's actually April 1st, 2020. We'll actually send out the forms in March of 2020. This time around, you're gonna receive a postcard, like you've always done during the census time. It'll come out in March. It'll inform everyone to go online and complete the form. If they're not comfortable going online, they can request through a 1-800 number a paper form, or they can call in and complete the form.
Okay.
It'll be 10 questions, 10 minutes.
And it begins in March, and it
That's
ends.
when the form goes out.
and
Right
the-
now, we're in the education phase, where we're coming around and we're making sure we motivate all the local governments, the counties, the cities, the state government. The governor is forming a complete count committee. We're actually tagging along with all of the ACCG meetings right now. I think I have 4 meetings this week. We've completed all the GMA meetings for the city municipalities, asking them to form their complete count committees. We're also working within the community where we have hard to enumerate tracts and blocks to make sure they form community complete count committees in those tracts that we can plug in with the county or the city if they decide to help you guys out in the community as well.
Okay, good. And how long is that time frame again? They'll get the card in March, and then what's the time frame that they have to respond back?
April 1st, 2020 is Census Day. That's when we ask everyone to respond.
So you
By
expect
that date?
over,
That day. April 1st is actually a snapshot of America. They have a few days after that to get the response in. If they do not get the response in, a few weeks later, we'll start non-response follow-up. And that's when you see census workers, that's the largest operation where they go door to door. And that's generally around about 30% of the population. In 2010, the average response rate was about 70% nationwide. We had some counties, some cities that had response rates as high as about 80-something%, which we tracked. We actually like to look at with the liaison to see what they did in their areas to get a high response rate.
Interesting.
in 2010, was the online option available?
It was not available.
So
is the
this
first time.
year, or you expect on April 1st, nationwide,
Yes,
that a single website,
yes,
when we know what happened with the Affordable Care Act,
yes, we did. We did 2 tests in 2015. We did non-response follow-up in Arizona. We did a test in the Savannah market here for census. What we found out in that test, we expected senior citizens not to respond. Seniors responded. Millennials were our #1 issue when it came to responding to the census. Tagging along with what the president of the United Way said, youth is our hardest to count population. And that's why it's so important to educate them on how they can actually fill that form out via their cell phone, a computer. We're partnering with the library systems anywhere where they can go online. We're partnering with some agencies where there's no internet access, where they can bring in internet access. And if they're not comfortable, they can call in or they could request that paper.
well, yeah, I understand all that part, but it just seems to me that the quickest way to get people not to fill out the form is for the website not to work. And to ask everybody to be going to the website on April 1st just seems like a daunting task.
They can answer before that, can't they?
That's what I'm finding. I'm finding it hard
They
to
can
believe.
answer up until that point.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, well,
you
that's-
continue
yeah, I
to
think that's-
mention the April 1st date, but I'm not hearing a time frame.
When can
of
they
which people
start
can
doing
start
it?
and finish the
When they
part.
receive the form, when they receive that form in March.
Okay, well, then the
Start
message,
30.
because I think every one of us up here thought you were saying that you're going to send the form out in March and everybody was supposed to go to the webpage on April 1st.
Well, I apologize for that.
Yeah, so-
That's when census takes a snapshot of American population.
Okay.
Because it's based on everyone that resides here as of April 1st.
So we'll still get the paper
You'll receive a
questionnaire in the mail.
postcard. You will receive a postcard that lets you know to be prepared to go online and complete your form.
Ah,
You have to request a
No
paper
more
form.
paper.
You have to request it, yeah.
okay.
If you're not comfortable going online, you request a paper form, or you can call the 1-800 number, they'll fill it out over the phone for you.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
And Jason, it would be helpful, I mean, you know that all the commissioners and the chairman have newsletters. Long before the card's coming out, it might be beneficial to have kind of like a short explanation of what you're going to be expecting folks to do. So when the card comes, they've already kind of been told about it in our newsletters and with Ross and everything else.
Yeah, you're gonna have a video that we can use here at the county that we can send to all the people who subscribe to our email list and everything? Is there?
That'd be a good thing.
We're working, we have a national campaign that puts out our videos. We don't do anything in the regional level, but we do have a media team, so I can put in a request.
Yeah, if you could just give us the video, we can, even if it's a national video, we can certainly use it here.
And run
Because
it
we all
on
have
TV.
email lists and I do a weekly video. The county has video. So I think there's something we can do to help you, even with what you have.
Thank
All right?
you. Any other questions?
Well, I mean, look, Jason's merit pay depends on it being successful, so you need to help him out here.
Jason, you better get another job.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Make Dana do it.
All right, the last issue today or topic is workforce housing best practices.
Yes, sir. Dana Johnson, Cobb County Community Development. I'm going to ask Mr. Michael Hughes to come up, and he will present some of the workforce housing research and some of our options that we've kind of discovered for some different private sector options to increase workforce housing.
Thank you, Dana. Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners, County Manager. Staff is pleased to present information regarding our workforce housing best practices. By way of background, the Board of Commissioners periodically requested staff conduct some research to develop best practices on how other communities around the nation are handling specific topics. In 2017, the board asked staff to develop some best practice research around workforce housing. This effort is the result of a collaboration from Economic Development, our Economic Development Division, as well as our CDBG office. As part of this presentation, we will be touching on the following topics. One is a definition of workforce housing and eligibility, the effects of the recession on workforce housing, the state of Cobb's workforce in terms of the residents and our workforce and employees, and then best practices, and then some options, specific options you may wish to consider. Thank you. In terms of definition, I think it's important to start with workforce housing is actually for individuals or families that are actually overqualified for government subsidized affordable housing. Specifically, in terms of eligibility, workforce housing is typically targeted for those individuals that make 80 to 120% of the area median income. And to break that down a little bit further, a household of one that makes between $39,000 and $58,000, and a household of four that makes between $55,000 and $83,000 would be considered workforce housing. And we get these numbers specifically from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and they do this sort of analysis annually. In terms of the effects from the recession, we want to talk about cost burdenship. And actually, there was a decrease in the cost burden on homeowners. 32% were paying in 2010, and in 2016, that burdenship number dropped all the way to 20%. And that was driven at the time largely by lower housing costs post-recession and income gains in the housing market after the housing market crash. And then the interest rate driven reductions in mortgage cost, and then foreclosures as well. But that was just an artificial decrease. We're now starting to see property values go up, and we're facing increasing percentages of individuals or in families that are now cost burdened in terms of their housing cost.
And what is a cost burden?
The cost burden is basically anybody that's over 30% and paying more than 30% of their income for housing costs is considered cost burden.
Okay.
In terms of the effects of the recession, paying for it now, we're seeing improved property values, and that's a rapid increase in property values, but at the same time, we've not seen our wages increase to keep up with those increases in property values.
And this is in Cobb County?
It's not just Cobb County, it's really a nationwide
This
issue.
is a nationwide chart.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, it's a nationwide issue, period. Increasing interest rates also make it difficult for affordable housing as well. And then in terms of state of the Cobb's workforce and specifically residents, and again, I want to emphasize the cost burden is anybody spending more than 30% of their income. In 2013, we had over a quarter of homeowners were considered cost burden. And in 2015, the median home value, which was just over $200,000, which is actually 3 times our area median income. And again, we want to emphasize that the rising home costs have not kept up. The wages have not kept up with the increases in property values. And renters actually have a more difficult challenge. They're actually 2 times likely to have a cost burden situation as opposed to homeowners. Next slide just emphasizes some locations in terms of where homeowners are and where renters are as it relates to those being a cost burden. The darker the shade, the color there, the higher the percentage of those that are homeowners or renters. And you can see here that renters are located primarily within the south and central area of Cobb County. And there are some occasional census tracts in the north and west portion of Cobb with more than 50% of the renters who are considered cost burden. In terms of Cobb County employee, yes, sir.
Can you go back?
Yes.
What are these lines?
Those are census tracts.
Okay.
The next slide just highlights the number of employees that live in Cobb. Only about 47% of the counties, or 47% of our employees live in Cobb, with the balance being outside of Cobb.
Are you gonna send us the slide?
I'll send you the whole presentation, Commissioner.
Okay, go back. So the 47% of Cobb employees, you're talking about Cobb County employees?
Cobb County employees.
So those who work for some version of Cobb County government, whether it's county or
It's,
judges or whatever.
we have about 5,100 employees, so it's those 5,100.
Those 5,100, okay,
Yes,
all
sir.
right.
But before we go off that slide, are you saying that that is the percentage because of your previous information, or we don't know that some of them may just decide they don't want to live in the county?
That's a good question.
We know that some of them don't.
Yes, and some
Right, so I
don't.
mean,
Yeah.
so the number should not be meant to imply that
Not
they
necessarily,
can't. Okay.
What would be interesting, though, if you were to add the school system employees in that slide.
Good point. And that's something we can work with the school system and see if they would provide this to us. Okay. Our next slide will just touch on affordability in terms of the value of the income ratio that seems to be trending upward. The value to income really measures the affordability of owning a home apart from mortgage costs by comparing the median value of home ownership, which are occupied units, to the actual median income of the area. And you'll notice here that Cobb County, along with Fulton County, DeKalb, and Fayetteville, actually have some of the highest ratios. Our ratio is right at 3. You'll see Fulton County has a ratio of almost 4.5. And then staff has identified some best practices as part of our research. Communities around the country set up housing trust funds, inclusionary zoning, reserve land for affordable housing, permanent affordability.
Part of it is.
Employee-assisted housing, which is something actually we're sort of engaged in right now with respect to some of our down payment assistance programs and some other things partnerships we're looking at with the Cobb Housing Authority and the Marietta Housing Authority as well. Code review, review and simplification, rezoning, preservation, some innovative partnerships, purpose-built communities, worker proximity housing programs, county affordable housing fund, and then repairing older homes and infrastructure. Probably one right now, Commissioner. Well, the one we talked about is some of the employer-assisted housing, some of the down payment assistance programs through the partnerships with some of the banks, Wells Fargo being one, and the East West Bank being the other. Yes, ma'am.
Does this include all residential, multifamily, apartments, single family, everything?
Mm-hmm.
But just residential?
Yes,
living?
just residential.
Okay.
And then with that, we've got, we have some options for your consideration. And before I go through this, I want to be clear that we're recommending programs really that we think engage the private sector to be a partner with helping us address this, what I think can be a very complicated and complex issue. The first being coordinated first-time home buyer program. Some of the funding sources that we've identified at this point would be the Marietta Housing Authority, the Housing Authority of Cobb County, as well as the CDBG and lending institutions. That's the one we're sort of already doing right now.
So you're telling me that those sources are currently available?
Yes.
Okay, I'm aware of the CDBG program one, and I know I've put that in my newsletter. I didn't know I could direct people to the Cobb Housing Authority for first-time home buyer assistance.
I probably should step back and say it's in process, And one of the things we're doing is looking at the housing authority, being able to develop a revenue stream. And from that revenue, they can provide down payment
Okay,
assistance for individuals.
so it's not developed yet?
Not 100% developed
Okay.
just yet. It's in conversation.
And Marietta Housing Authority has an ongoing
They
program?
do have an ongoing program.
Interesting. Okay.
One of the other programs we're discussing as well, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
But it would be available at their, wherever they're building and their projects, like
Yes, yes.
Oh,
whatever
so
part of the
that's a
county
good
they're-
clarification. So this isn't any home that someone can come in and get assistance for? Does it have to be a project through one of, I mean, CDBG doesn't build homes, so, I mean, this
No.
could be for any program, but for Marietta Housing Authority, is it just available for the homes that they develop?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Commissioner, I think
how would they
one of the
work?
things that is when Mr. Hughes referred to the program with the Cobb Housing Authority that's almost up to speed, there would be fees collected by the housing authority for either issuing bonds or assisting in the transaction or actually taking title to the property. And those development fees would then be funneled into or fenced off into an account that was specific to providing, let's say, down payment assistance to those folks that the program was geared toward. Specifically in the instance with the Cobb Housing Authority, I think it's really going to be geared to Cobb County employees, whether it be police, fire, general government employees. I believe Chairman Boyce has actually asked us to reach out to try to loop the Cobb County School District employees into that
Okay.
bundle of employees that would be eligible for the money,
Okay, interesting.
for the down payment assistance.
Okay.
So it could be in any subdivision or any project?
Yes,
They
Yes,
could
ma'am.
apply if they're employees?
yes,
County?
absolutely.
Okay.
And then the second recommendation would be just low-interest loan programs and lending institutions. The county could provide or assist with providing homeownership education and refer people to lending institutions as well. We are doing that already. Density bonuses might be something you want to consider as well, that would require changes to our workforce housing code. And developers would guarantee that a certain percentage of units would be set aside in their projects.
Okay, Michael, help me understand for number 2, and Chairman, you said you're doing that already. This is specifically for Cobb County employees, not for,
Yes.
okay,
Well, we have made an effort to educate Cobb County employees on the options that are available to them, and we've had over 20 accept that already.
Okay,
And
good.
move into homes.
Very good. So we've had some success with that, and I presume some of the program options you have here, they're for the public at large, Cobb County residents at large, and then some are for Cobb County.
Provided they meet the income guidelines, yes.
I think one of the questions I have here, and I mean, I think we have to, I'm not really sure, and I mean, I understand you're explaining what the issues are, but I don't really see what is our goal here. You know, we talk about, I think the chairman wants to have more employees live here, but we don't know how many of the ones that don't live here want to live here. Okay, so now we have a number. And so to me, before you can kind of pick out the options, what is the goal that we're trying to accomplish?
Well, here's my problem. I can't force county employees to live in Cobb County.
No, I understand that.
I can take them to the water, I can't make them drink.
I know, but I guess what I'm asking is, what is the goal
Well,
that we as a county government are trying to accomplish here?
Well, my goal has been that 100% of county employees know about the options that are available to them. That's been my goal, all right? I'm trying to expand this by including the school system and also workers like at the hospitals. I consider them the workforce that we should be focusing on. And trying to bring them into a coalition where we can provide them the options that are available and then see what it is we can do to help that workforce.
Okay, well, it's one thing to educate them about the options that are available. It's another thing to go and start changing the code to allow density bonuses and some of the other things that have been discussed. And I think that before this board moves in a particular direction, I think that there has to be a consensus of the board. What is it that the board is trying to accomplish?
I couldn't agree with you more.
From the options that staff has brought forward, what we are recommending to the board is to focus on different homeownership options, on ways that we could increase homeownership within people of that income range, of the moderate income range in Cobb County. That way, people get integrated into the community and are able to start building wealth to help them long-term.
Commissioner Ott, you did make a good point, though, about a goal. I do know that Dana, Mr. Hughes and Mr. Johnson have discussed with me just during status meetings as far as what a goal might be. I think just starting out, it might be a real high-level goal, such as reducing the percentage of folks that are considered burdensome housing. And that might be, we might be able to provide the board targeted goals or what we might try to do within a 5-year period of reducing the percentage from, let's say, if it's 25% of the population or the county employees, we would reduce it to 20% that would be considered burdensome.
And I think that it's always best to have the goal first. But what I've seen so far is we keep being presented with options, do this, do that, change the code here, do this or whatever, and with no direction as to what the board wants to try to accomplish.
So
And I really think that before the board is asked to vote on particular steps, that there has to be consensus among the board as to what is it that the board wants to accomplish.
And the purpose of this presentation was really for education. And we have received good direction, and we'll be getting with the board members individually to see if we can build consensus around a number of high-level goals that we could then dig deeper into those different best practices and see which one of those best practices would meet the board's goal.
And I can support what Commissioner Ott is sharing for us to have some direction.
Sure.
Because I would agree, and that's been a bit of a challenge for me. I mean, I think anything that supports the employees as far as being able to find housing, I think that's a plus. So I commend those ongoing efforts and certainly want to continue to support that. But some of the broader things that Commissioner Ott's talking about that do impact our code, I do think that we should come together and figure out what we want to do with that.
Sure.
It's my understanding when we first started looking into this, when Michael Murphy started the process last year, I guess last year, I thought we were looking at our own law enforcement or sheriff, all the county employees, teachers, which would include the school system, teachers, and to be able to afford housing in Cobb, to help them, not have to live so far away and commute in and be part of the community. And I thought from affordable housing, we got to workforce development housing.
I think that was certainly one of the priorities, but I think there's also individuals who aren't employed by any of the ones you just suggested that are workforce eligible based on their income as well.
On the income range, okay.
Yes.
And again, what we're talking about through this research is just the workforce housing side of it, not the affordable housing side of it, because they are very different. And
Right.
it gets confusing, but that's why we're being very explicit that these recommendations are for that workforce portion of it.
And yeah, I didn't sit down and crunch numbers, but I mean, those that are making $10 or $12 an hour still may not qualify under that, and there's going to be that continuing gap to find housing or quality housing for that population.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know how many of them are living here, and what do we do with that?
You're correct.
I mean,
That's
something that's not talked about. I know we're looking at solutions, but you have populations of people living in hotels and motels. I see the school buses going there and picking them up. It's a disheartening situation that's really a safety net here. I don't know what our approach is to address that.
Well, this is clearly, the workforce housing is low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And then based on what we learned from this initiative, we can expand it to the affordable housing, which is certainly going to have a lot more vigorous debate. Let's put it that way. But we're going to get to that, all right? This isn't just, obviously, we're focusing on the workforce now. And then if the board so chooses, then we can expand this effort into affordable housing, which will probably involve other tools that we need to bring on board.
I hear
That will
you.
involve a more robust discussion with the communities.
Yes, just know we have a speaker that comes once or twice a month that speaks about that population.
Sure,
And
absolutely.
I don't want us to disregard.
Right.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we'll wait for your product.
I got one
You have
more
one
slide.
more
I'm sorry,
slide?
yes, are
Okay.
there more options?
One more,
Okay.
just a few more options.
Okay.
Incentivize unused retail commercial space to be converted into residential space. I know that's a zoning solution, but something you may
What
want to
does
consider.
what does that look like?
I think what that would look like are coming forward with some recommendations to change zoning or land use designation for abandoned or retail centers that may not be good candidates for retail, may be better candidate for residential. And incentivizing them to do that.
Okay,
Housing trust fund might be something we consider as well. A lot of jurisdictions assess an impact fee for new residential construction.
interesting.
And then accessory dwellings may include garage apartments, basement units, in-law suites, which obviously will require some changes to the zoning code. And then the last item is tax allocation districts. Developing a redevelopment plan and establishing a tax allocation district. If the board were so inclined, you could include language in a redevelopment plan that requires workforce housing be developed within that geographical area. And if you are so inclined, you could provide some funding through tax allocation bonds that you may issue to help support a developer that was interested in doing that in a specific area.
Something I think that needs to be brought with further information to the board is how to address if someone buys a home under one of these incentives programs, what is to prevent them from turning around and flipping it at a market rate?
I know.
Because, if there's no controls over that, and I don't know what the federal fair housing rules are about that, but if there is no restriction to that, then, that's kind of a giveaway.
Correct, and I think some jurisdictions, there is a affordability period. They would have to pay back some of the funds. I think that's something that some jurisdictions looked at, but we can get more details.
Yeah, clearly, I mean, because that's come up every time we've talked about this as to how do you address that? Because it's one thing in a rental market, that can, it's much easier for the property owner to control, but in a for sale market, I mean, that has to be addressed.
Absolutely. We'll make note of that, Commissioner. Thank you.
Something else I wanted to share too, which is a challenge for us here in Cobb, but we have limitations on how many unrelated adults can live in a home or how many vehicles can be in a home. And this is very low-hanging fruit to have more than one family living in a home, but we also have contradicting policies here at the county that don't permit people to take advantage of a way to share the burden of housing in that respect. And I think that's something that we can take a look at that can have an immediate impact, but it would be reversing a policy that's been a sticking point for us for some time.
I made note of that, Commissioner.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, team. And we're adjourned.